Hello, YouTubers. Thank you for tuning in to the inaugural edition of Next Generation Volleyball. And today we're going to take a statistical look at the game. We're going to use a little bit of math. It's not terribly complicated, don't worry. But we find it to be illuminating to exactly what's going on the volleyball court and to share with you what it takes to win games. We think the game is wildly misunderstood. And we want to share with you exactly what it takes to win games. And further, we are going to follow up this instructional video with more videos about defense primarily, at least initially. And those videos on defense share with you a very innovative, perhaps even provocative way to play the game on the defensive end. And we need to have some context in that. If we're just sharing with you a different way to play the game for no particular reason other than, hey, this is new, well, that's not very useful. But in this video, what we want to do is show you, both statistically and with some math, how important it is to improve our defense, especially in the way that we're going to ask you to improve it in the following videos. But for now, let's just take a look at the game in a different way. I think we might, if you know the game at all, I think you might agree that the way we currently keep statistics is woefully inadequate. It just doesn't really give you a strong idea of what's going on. And we primarily think that that's the case because the game revolves around two ideas: in system, out of system. And if your team is primarily in system, that is another way of saying that your team is winning. And if your team is out of system, that means that you're losing. So that's such a simple idea, and all coaches know this, and yet, for some reason, it's not very deeply applied, meaning there's layers to this idea, and we need to really think this through. Staying in system is the game, is everything. And so what we want to do is share with you the consequences of being in system and being out of system. So let's consider a typical rally. And by the way, all of my videos following this, I have done my level best to be inclusive in all levels of the game. Club, high school, women's, men's, boys, girls, all of it applies. But in today's discussion, just for this statistical analysis, I'm going to stick to men's Division I because that's what I know best. And there's some fairly, not complicated ideas, but the ideas I'm going to share with you require a lot of statistical analysis. And I don't have the time to look at every different level. And so I'm just going to stick with what I know best for this. And my strong suspicion, virtually certain, is that this absolutely applies to all levels of the game. Nonetheless, let's just consider that we're talking about men's Division I for the moment. Okay, so what happens in a game? Guy goes back here and serves. Well, if you think about the game, what I'd like to do is ask you to look at this game in the context of a 10-point must. I'll borrow a boxing term, right? 10 p.m. And what that means is that every time a player touches the ball, the odds of that team winning that rally change. So when this player serves, we think that 3 out of 10 plays, the serving team wins. Maybe it's 4, I don't know. Let's just stick with 3 for the moment. By the way, all of these numbers need a lot of work, and I'm hoping that some of you viewers will help me. The general idea that we're sharing is we believe very powerful. The exact numbers matter, and so we would like some help, but I think we can draw some very powerful conclusions by making what at this point is just some estimates. This is not a willy-nilly number. I've looked into this. I've done my best, but it takes a lot of work, as you're going to start to see when we move through this. Okay, so if this player serves 3 out of 10 times, this team will score. So we're going to assign a 3 at the moment of contact of this serve. ball travels, somebody over here passes it. So as soon as this pass occurs, odds change, right? So if this pass stays in system, now this team goes from 3, not a 3. If this team is 3, then this team is a 7 at that point. 3 here, 7 there, a total of 10. So it goes from 3, this player touches it. Now let's say that this touch turns into an in-system play. Well, we have seen that a in-system play, the team that is in-system wins 9 out of 10 rallies. Now, excuse me, this team may not actually win at this exact moment of this contact on this side, but the eventuality of this rally is if this guy passes the ball in system, this team is going to win the rally 9 out of 10 times. So this number goes from 7 to 9. And what we're going to do is assign this server a -2. So that serve was effectively a -2. If you're serving and they're putting the ball in system, you're hurting your team, obviously, on the server's end. So this play goes from 7 to 9, so we're going to give this player a +2, this player a -2. The total is now 9, because when you're in system, you're going to be 9 out of 10 times you're going to score a point. So now this play devolves into a battle between the setter and the middle blocker. Here is the battle. Can the setter deliver the ball, distribute a set so that this middle blocker cannot be there? In other words, all the setter's trying to do is get one-on-one somewhere. And what we found, of course, is that most time he does. So the setter distributes. Let's say he goes outside. And here's where the set goes. So the pass to there and the set outside. Middle blocker cannot get there in time, so now we're one-on-one. That is the essence of being in system, to get this one-on-one attack. So this is the first point where we're making a tremendous mistake in understanding what it takes to win in volleyball. Right now, at this point, where this attacker, who's going to win 9 out of 10 rallies, is facing this blocker. Because we're typically assigning a hitting percentage to this attacker regardless of whether it's an in-system or out-of-system attack. And clearly, those are miles apart in reality. So at this point, this attacker is going to almost always defeat the single blocker. And bam, there goes the attack, point. So that goes from 9, now it becomes 10. So what we have done is gone from, on this side, we've gone from a 7 to a 9 to a 10. So we go 7, we give a +2 to the passer. We're going to, for the moment, I don't quite know how to assign a numbering system to the setter's actions, though clearly it's important. We'll have to just set that aside for the moment. And then we're going to give the attacker a 1 if he successfully completes an attack. So bam, bam, that's it. So this attacker gets a +1. And there's a point. That happens, right? So let's take a look at another scenario. Let's suppose that the server is creates an out-of-system pass, right? Here goes the serve, and the pass goes out of system. Bam, let's say it's over here somewhere. There goes the set. Let's say it's, again, cross court, but now this guy gets over and we got a double block. Obviously, this happens all the time, too. So what we have found is that this is a wild card play. In the in-system attack, is almost always successful. And it doesn't really matter who's swinging. It's pretty much all the same results. But this is a different scenario. And we think that the reason we're seeing different numbers here, by the way, let's assign some numbers. Whoops. It's still a 3 out of 10 on the serve, right? Let's back up. Pardon myself. I got a little ahead of myself here. So the serve occurs. We're at 3. Over here we're at 7. The serve occurs. The touch and pass happens. Now we're at 5. Because we think 5 out of 10 out of system attacks result in a score. So now it's a 50-50 game is what we have seen. If it's out of system, if your attack is out of system, it's 50-50 on who's going to win the rally. And that's obviously a pretty important distinction there. So now we've got a double block, and what's going to happen here? Well, a lot of things can happen. You can hit it out. You can get blocked. It can be a kill. But what we have seen as the single most important result from this scenario, 1 attacker, 2 blockers, is the deflection or a shot. So if we are forcing this attacker to swing against 2 blockers, the following videos that we have made on defense are all about this scenario. Single attacker, double block, and a deflected attack that slows down and gives our defenders a chance to make a play. What we have found is this is the single most important and crux moment in a rally. If you can force the opponents into an out-of-system attack and then pick up the digs, pick up the dinks, pick up the deflections. Because if you think about it, let's back up a little bit. Now this is kind of what we might call a money ball approach to the game, meaning we're trying to tear apart the details of the game in a way that makes it understandable, and so we can really get down to the nitty-gritty of how you win and lose rallies, games, and matches. So in Moneyball, which is a baseball analogy, what we have learned, and by the way, I'm not an expert on, it's called sabermetrics. Saber is Society of American Baseball Research. And undoubtedly there's going to be some sabermetricians that are watching this that really understand the game of baseball from a sabermetrics approach better than I do. And I really don't want to get into any kind of discussion about baseball and sabermetrics other than to say this much about baseball. 20 years ago, roughly, and earlier, the idea of walks in baseball was almost universally disregarded as a non-issue. A walk was a nothing play that nobody paid attention to. And as a result of sabermetrics, what we have learned is walks are everything, to the point where now it's becoming a standalone stat because it represents so much of what's going on in baseball. Because the heart of the game of baseball, by almost all accounts, is the battle over the strike zone between the pitcher and the batter. And if a batter is getting a high number of walks, that means something very simple. He's winning the battle over the strike zone. And if a pitcher, of course, can get strikeouts or at least avoid walks, consequently, we can recognize that he's winning the battle over the strike zone. So now there's a lot of other things, other good things that happen if you get a walk. First of all, of course, you get on base. That's good. You're wearing out the pitcher. That's good if you're a batter, that is. And you're also getting a chance to see a lot of pitches. So you're going to have a higher chance of seeing a mistake pitch, which you can hopefully drive. But beyond that, what walks really indicate is that you're winning that battle over the strike zone. So a really good analogy, we believe, to walks in baseball is the number of digs that you're picking up, especially, we believe, if you're picking up digs from, and most often they'll be out of system plays, if you're going to pick those up and you can return them in system. So what we think is an analogy for walks in baseball would be digs in system. Because let's think about this for a moment. Everything that the serving team does, in theory at least, is designed to put this team off balance and hopefully out of system. The serve is designed to strictly make it tough, to put them out of system. And the set that goes out, so now we got this double block that we've worked so hard to coordinate. And so if you're the serving team and you do all this right, you get your blocks up, you put them out of system, it makes perfect sense that the serving team, the team that's going to, is also the team that's going to pick up the most digs. And if we can start to look at that number, who's getting the most digs, and if we can pick that up in system, then it seems patently clear that we're going to win games. Now, I suspect what you're thinking right now is, oh, but what about aces? Another way to score. What about stuff blocks? What about hitting the ball out of bounds? Those are all ways that we can score. But what we have found is those are extraordinary wild card plays, and that they tend to pretty much equalize between teams. So that the team, for instance, that has the most aces in a match is rare. Not, I shouldn't say rarely, is not terribly equivalent to the team that wins the match. Likewise with stuff blocks. Obviously a stuff block is great, but it's not a strong indicator of who's winning the match. But the team that digs the most balls and puts them in system is almost always the team that wins the match. That's why we believe this is an incredibly important stat. And therefore, if this is an important stat, well, let's train our players on how to make this play. And I think now a lot of coaches are going to say, well, of course, right? We're playing defense. We want to win the rally. We're going to play defense. Well, I think that there's two important distinctions that we're sharing with you right now about how we currently play defense and how we should play defense. And that is, number one, forget the hard-driven balls. Because what we're finding is it's extremely difficult. If this attacker can successfully defeat this double block and have an attack that goes untouched past the block, you're not going to dig it. So it's digging the hard-driven balls gives you no benefit. It's just useless. Because even if, let's say this guy goes strong angle right here, boop, 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 but we dig it. It's a hard-driven ball, but our angle block digger digs it. Guess what? From what we can tell, 9 out of 10 times, you're going to give them a free ball. So if you think in the context of the 10 p.m. system, they are now 5 out of 10, but they successfully hit a hard-driven ball. This guy digs it, but not well. It comes back here and then free ball back to him. Well, now they're in system, and instead of it being a 5, they're going to be back to that in-system attack, which is a 9. And they're going to score. So digging a hard-driven ball gets you nothing, almost always. Which is why in our following videos, we're going to talk a lot about defense and how useless or silly it is to even think about the hard-driven balls. And we're going to tell you again and again that the reason it's not important to worry about hard-driven is because you're not getting swings off them. But from a 10 p.m. perspective, what it means is you're taking a play and you're giving them a free ball, which puts them into a 9. And what's the point? And there is none. Don't worry about the hard-driven balls. So what we're sharing with you about how to play defense in this numbers kind of an approach is that Number one, don't worry about the hard-driven balls. They're not going to help you. And number two, it's incredibly important to dig the deflections and shots back in system. So when you're training as a coach, when you're training your players, and you give them dinks and deflect, hopefully you're going to start working on how to help them dig deflected balls because they're so very important. What we want to train them is not only to pick them up, but to get them back in system so you guys can get a swing, a good swing on those balls. And it's incredibly important that we put a deflected ball back in play in system so that we're now going to be taking this, say, an attack into a double block is a 5, and let's say it's deflected. Let's say it's deflected off the top, and it goes somewhere here, and our back row player goes and grabs it, picks it up right there. If he can successfully get this ball back to the center in system, we've gone from a 5 on this side to a 9. That's a 4-point switch on one touch. Believe me, that's a lot of change in the odds right there. That's a rare play, and it's a very, very important play. So that if we can get our defenders to rally in system, boy, we're going to win the match. We're going to win a lot of matches. And further, just like walks are such a dipstick measurement, perhaps, of the success of the battle over the strike zone, digging balls back in system are such a positive consequence of doing so much right. Let's think about this. Tough serve, out of system pass, double block on it, the swing, and the blockers get a piece of it. All of this that we've done is for the sole purpose of slowing this attack down, slowing it down enough so now our diggers can make a play. Well, diggers got to make a play now. We've done the tough serve, we've done the block, we've done the deflection. One more piece of the puzzle, dig the ball in system. And that's where we're falling down because we're not training our players to dig deflected balls and we're not emphasizing those digs need to be in system. So I hope, coaches, you're hearing this because the thing that we see that really, like, the heart of the game of volleyball, the heart of the game of baseball is the battle over the strike zone. The heart of the game of volleyball, surprisingly enough, is ball control. And this does not mean that we're not going to see 6'8" huge jumpers with big arm swings on the court. That volleyball is made for that kind of player, of course. We're always going to see that. But the fact of the matter is, no matter what level you're at, the size and athleticism of the players are going to be pretty equal. If you are fortunate enough to recruit a couple of 6'8" hammers, well, guess what? So is your opponent, probably, if that's the level you're at. So it's not about athleticism anymore because it's always going to be fairly equal. It's about training and good strategy and good tactics. And this is what we're talking about. You need to train your players to pick those balls up. So, like I said, if walks are the dipstick measurement for baseball, in-system digs are the dipstick measurement in volleyball because the number of times this play is made is strongly indicative of who's going to win the match. Unlike ace serves or stuff blocks, which really don't give you any indication who's going to win the match. But the team that digs the most balls in system wins the match. And as we start to get better at this dynamic, I believe it's going to be even a stronger indicator of who wins the match. We're going to find that this is everything. Okay. So that's a little context. What you're going to see in the following videos is a great deal of emphasis on picking up deflections and dinks, because that's how you win matches. That's how you have the most important change in odds. You go from an out of system 5 to an in system 9. That's a 4-point switch, and that's going to win matches over and over and over again. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about other what we might call inflection points in a rally. In other words, at what point does something happen on the court that can indicate who's going to win the match? Okay, so let's talk about in-system again. All right, so the serve happens, bam, let's say it's an in-system. And we go from, so it's a serve, we start over here at 3, and the serve happens, and we're over here as a 7. Serve happens, and let's say it's an in-system serve, pass. So we go to a 9. Okay, this is the first inflection point we see for an in-system play. Now remember, the critical inflection point is obviously this pass, but I think everybody kind of gets that, because this pass is also a 4-point switch. Remember, we're serving at a 3, so over here is a 7, and depending on this pass, it's either going to become a 9 or a 5. Or a 5. That's a 4-point switch on that pass. And further, we've also seen that the teams that pass the best win. So this is a very strong indicator of who's going to win the match. But I think coaches understand that. That's not terribly surprising. So I'm not too worried about emphasizing the importance of passing. We all get that. But what we're not seeing is that once that play becomes, say, an in-system, now we're at a 9, it's in-system, and now we have this battle. And this is a moment in the rally that I think coaches may not be recognizing for as important as it is. Because there's this moment here when the setter is about to set it, and the blocker has to decide what to do. And we'll get into this perhaps in future videos, but this is a fascinating moment in a rally. And we believe that there's a lot more work that can be done to change these odds in favor of either team, depending on how they handle this moment where the setter is going to distribute a good pass. But let's just share a few real quick ideas. The first thing that we're seeing a problem with is this middle blocker is starting to come, right? And this middle blocker's late. The middle blocker is essentially jumping at the same moment the setter is setting. If you're seeing that dynamic, the blocker, the attacker is jumping in unison with the set, you're making a tremendous mistake as an offensive team, because you're giving the blocker here a chance to really watch the play before he decides on what to do. And you don't want to give this blocker a chance. So the first change that we should make as an offensive team is to train our middle blockers to be in the air waiting for that middle set before the setter touches the ball. And there are so many good things that happen if you do that. The first is the setter has a thorough and complete confidence of where you are going to be because he can see you. You're going to be in the air giving him a nice big target. And it's just easy. He doesn't have to time the set. He can just fling it in your general direction at pretty much almost any speed. And you're going to have a chance to contact it. So that's the first thing that we would strongly emphasize. Now, I think coaches have some idea of the importance of a truly quick attack, but I don't really see a lot of talk about that. And it's kind of obvious to me, as I used to middle attack a lot. But we need to make it as hard as we possibly can on this blocker. We need to force him to jump regardless of where that set goes. We need to force him to commit to the middle attacker. If we can do that, well, we're going to definitely be one-on-one on the outside. That usually results in a lot of success. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, as the blocking team, what we believe is going to happen pretty soon, sooner or later, because we're going to start to think about, okay, in-system attacks are a 9. Wow. Well, that's interesting. So what we're going to do is we're going to start completely giving up on one of these plays. We're going to say, okay, if this setter goes back row, back set, we're just going to let him go one-on-one. We don't care. What we are going to try to do is take these 3 blockers and do our best to put 2 of them on something, no matter what, when we're in system, because the odds are so strongly already in this team's favor that it's worth it to just guess and just take one of these plays. All right, let's just say we're going to take the back set off the table. All right, if the setter goes back, we don't care. They're going to win the rally anyway. 9 out of 10. Let them swing, no block. Who cares? But what we're going to do is we're going to assign this blocker to the middle, and these 2 to this guy. So we're going to hope that he goes front set, and we're going to get 2 blockers on that. And if we can get 2 blockers 1 out of 3 times, well, we're going to change the odds in our favor. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but we're going to take this 9 and we're going to bring it down to about an 8, maybe even a 7. With this system. And I don't know if this actually is going to work, because the wild card is the setter going to really recognize what's happening. And if the setter can see this with regularity and just back set when this play is making, this doesn't work. So I'm not so much saying that this is something that needs to happen. What I am saying is, look at this, man. We got a 9 up here. This team is going to score 9 out of 10 times. And we can't keep playing this game the same way, because this doesn't work. We got to build rallies into the system. And we got to figure out a way to slow these attacks, these in-system attacks. We got to slow them down. We got to make rallies happen and give our diggers a chance. So that's the second thing that I would say is potentiality of these, of starting to apply these numbers and starting to think about what's going on the court. All right. There's something else I want to point out, though, on an in-system attack. The way we currently play it, of course, the setter sets it outside, and we're one-on-one, right? That's your typical in-system situation. Well, if we can find blockers that can actually positively affect this attack on a regular basis, that's a game changer right there, right? And so what I see happening on the court is our best blocker is almost always the middle blocker. And I think that that's a huge mistake, because what we're seeing is the middle blocker really needs to be quick. And what we're trying to do on in-system attacks is get our very quick middle blocker, just get him over a little bit and have him get a hand up. Just one hand. If you can just kind of get one hand, if you can just do a quick, one quick shuffle and reach over and get a hand, he might be able to slow down 1 out of 10 attacks. But although that doesn't seem like much, that takes his 9 down to an 8. If you can just slow down 1 out of 10. And that's a game changer, right? Because there's a lot of in-system attacks. So the other thing is, if we can get a good, solid outside blocker, this ought to be our giant best at blocker right in that spot. This guy, if we can get a guy out here as 6'8", 6'9", with a big jump and long arms, makes it really hard as possible for the one-on-one attack to occur between a quick middle blocker trying to fill a little bit and a big outside block there. We think, again, that this 9, we can maybe get it down to 8 or even 7 on the in-system attacks. by making those two changes. Again, the two changes we're recommending: find quicker middle blockers, find bigger outside pin blockers. Because this in-system attack we think is basically it's not good for the game. It's kind of destroying the game, because this is pretty much, we know the result. If you're in system and the set goes outside and it's a one-on-one attack, pretty much for sure going to be a point. I have seen in my time as both a player and fan, there are a handful of outside blockers who can really put the clamps on. All right. So we have seen a handful of outside blockers who can put the clamps on this in-system attack. And those are special players. If you can find that guy, my hat's off. But they don't just show up everywhere. They're few and far between. So let's take another look at this game on the out-of-system attack. As we said, there's a serve, bam, pass. Now let's say it's an out-of-system pass again. And for consistency's sake, let's assume again it's an outside set. So we have one attacker, two blockers, out-of-system play. Let's talk about this inflection point. As we said, the first inflection point is always the pass. That's critical to figuring out who's going to win the rally. But when it's an out-of-system play, we find that the setter's job becomes largely irrelevant. Basically, he's just going to shoot it over here. Doesn't take a lot of skill, relatively speaking. Now, the inflection point becomes this attack, the moment of the swing. And what we have found is that there's a great deal of misunderstanding about this attack. The numbers on the success of this attack vary so wildly that we actually think there's a lot of luck here. And so this is perhaps an unfortunate aspect of the game of volleyball, in that a close match really may just come down to who's outside out of system attack, rattles around more, and happens to jump into the stands. A couple of those for your side, close match, you win. Well, that's why we play the game too, right? Like in baseball, of course, the difference between winning and losing a game is the line drive that the guy happens to catch or doesn't catch, right? So it goes. That's why we play the games. They're fun. But we can glean information from this attack, because we think that far too much emphasis is placed on how effective this attack is by just, the eye test, right? If this guy can jump high and swing hard, logically he's good at the attack. And therefore, we want his swing in this critical moment against the double block. And that's not a terrible idea, but I think we can do better than that, because I remember playing against at least a couple of guys that I can think of. One name that comes to mind, you may not, he's a fairly unknown player unless you happen to be from Long Beach, which I am, Larry Overton, left-handed swinger, who didn't really seem to do a whole lot of special stuff as an attacker. He just jumped and swung, right? But the funny thing about Larry Overton when he swings is you couldn't touch the ball. He'd find the spot and put it past you over and over and over and over and over again. To the point where you have to scratch your head and think, well, he's doing something different than everybody else. And I always thought that there's guys like that out there who are probably sitting on the bench because they're not terribly awesome. They don't jump all that great. I mean, pretty much anybody that plays volleyball can jump, right? But compared to other volleyball players, you got almost every coach, I'm going to suggest, has a guy that's sitting on the bench who's probably a lot better as an attacker than you know, because he's not awesome looking, he doesn't have this hugest jump or the biggest arm swing, but what we're looking for in our outside attack is, again, let me use a baseball analogy. Batters in baseball, when scouting and recruiting occurs, we look for three things. We look for plate discipline, which means ability to recognize the pitch to swing at from the pitch to not swing at. And, you know, pitches coming at 90 or even 100 miles an hour, you have very little time to make that decision. And it's the rare human that's capable of that. So plate discipline is an extremely important attribute that's hard to find. And plate discipline, as we talked about walks, plate discipline is the single most important attribute a baseball player can have, a hitter. And it's the single most telling attribute that gets you walks. So that's why walks are such an important stat in baseball. Players that walk have plate discipline. Plate discipline is everything, because there are two other attributes that you're looking for in a baseball player. That is ability to make contact and power. But it all starts with plate discipline, meaning if you swing at your pitches, you're most likely to hit home runs, and you're most likely to make contact. So the game of baseball, when they're recruiting hitters, scouts and recruiters always look for players that have plate discipline. It's difficult to see, difficult to find, but it's gold. And the best people with plate discipline are going to make it to the major leagues. Well, what's the analogy for this outside attacker? Well, we believe that we're looking for a couple of attributes in our outside attackers in this out-of-system attack. That is, number one, a high percentage of his attacks are going to go untouched, but still stay in the court. That seems pretty obvious, but we're not going to really be thinking about his hitting average. We're looking for, do his attacks penetrate the block untouched? So let's think about this. Let's kind of play a thought game. If, let's say you have a second string attacker, he comes onto the court, you're winning 2-0 against some team you know you're going to crush. So in the third game, you go ahead and start it. And in fact, you have your whole second team on the court. Well, guess what happens with your second team? You almost for sure have less ball control. So now, almost all of these serves are going to wind up out of system. And let's say you have this unknown, fabulous attacker, and now he's getting set after set out of system. Well, his numbers are going to not be that great. No matter how good he is at hitting out of system, you're not going to notice it because he's got almost no chance to hit in system. So that at the end of the match, let's say you do win the third game, and you look at his hitting numbers, and they're not great. And you think, I know I should not be starting him because his hitting numbers are poor. Well, I think it's pretty obvious. Your hitting numbers are going to be poor if you're hitting out of system constantly. Even the best of us are not going to have much success hitting out of system. But what we can see is attributes. This guy, first of all, swinging, penetrating the block untouched. Number two, can he distribute his attacks, both line and angle, with confidence? That's the second attribute of an outside hitter that typically indicates success. And the third one, this one took me a long time to figure out, years and years. But we are going to encourage our outside attackers hitting into a double block to hit between the block. That takes a lot of courage, and it takes accuracy, and it takes good vision. So we think that if you can penetrate a double block and go between it with consistency, and that's rarely going to go untouched. It's going to rattle around a little bit in there. But if you're capable of finding that hole between the two blockers, you got a special player there, I think. And ultimately what we're saying is, just like in baseball, we got play discipline, contact, and power. Here we have vision, ability to hit everywhere, and power too. So I think we're missing so much about vision and accuracy, basically. I guess that's probably a better term. We need to have vision and accuracy from our outside hitters. And we have no way to measure that, or we're not noticing it. All we see, I believe, is power. Big jumps, big arm swings, that's who's on the court. And we're completely missing both vision and accuracy. Vision meaning knowing where to go. So vision would be a good analogy to plate discipline. If you have good vision, you know where to go. And if you have accuracy, that means that not only do you know where to go, you can put it there. Those are two difficult things to find in your attackers. So I'm hoping, coaches, you're going to hear this. And you're going to start thinking about who should be on the court a little differently from now on. We need to train these attributes. For instance, I would chart my outside hitters to see where their attacks are going, because you're going to find that either they prefer angle or line to a great extent. And that is a sure sign of a stuck attacker who really needs to expand their opportunities or options. Most outside attackers, like for instance for me, I primarily was a right side or opposite attacker, and I got really good at hitting line from the right side, to the point where from the right side I began to have trouble hitting angle, and that's not acceptable. We really need to always maintain our ability to hit to all points, and the only way to notice this is to track with a scatter chart where our attacks are going. I know it takes a lot of work. Anyway, so that's one angle, one consequence of applying this 10-point must system is that we're starting to see what it really takes to be an effective attacker and what it really takes to be an effective blocker. Likewise, most stuff blocks are going to occur on this out-of-system situation, right? Two entrenched blockers have a huge opportunity to make a big stuff block there. So we see that's where the blocking numbers come from. And okay, fabulous. A stuff block's always good if you're the blocking team, of course. But these are not terribly important. It's not a surprise that these blockers are going to get a couple of stuff blocks in this scenario. However, if you can find a blocker in system that's one-on-one, that can get a couple of stuff blocks, oh my, that's a match changer right there. Like, that's no doubt. This is a special player. One player that I know of who I witnessed as a fan who had some abilities here was Paul Lottman at Long Beach State. That guy could really block one-on-one. It was remarkable. I don't know how he did it, to tell you the truth, but he was special at that. And find some Paul Lottmans, right? Because we need to stop. We need to slow down this in-system attack. We really gotta do something about it. Okay. Anyway, there you go. So I'm gonna wrap this up. I hope that you've noticed some interesting ideas on your own too with this 10-point must system. Start thinking about every time a touch occurs how the odds change, and understand that I'm not sure of these numbers too either. Is it a 7? Is it 3 out of 10 that the serving team, or is it 4 out of 10? I'm not positive of that. Is in systems 9 out of 10 right now, or is it more like 8 out of 10? And remember, it's not about winning that exact moment. It's about winning the entire rally. Because of course, what happens a lot of times if you're hitting in system, for instance, crushing the ball, and maybe there's a little bit of a piece of it, and maybe some digger makes a great play and they just give you a free ball back. well, you're still in system. You're going to crush it at them anyway. So remember, it's always about winning the rally, not winning that moment of the point. So in any case, I'm looking for a little help with this. What's the success rate for in-system attacks, out-of-system attacks? Middle attacks are typically always in-system, right? We believe that they're always right around the 9s. Out-of-system is about a 5. But we could be wrong. All right, so again, thank you. This is Kurt Schasker for Next Generation Volleyball. We hope that you tune in to our following videos on defense. And we hope that we've given you a context, which is please learn how to dig the deflections and the shots, because that is the single most important way to win a match, digging the deflections. And so we've offered you a series of videos that are going to help that very idea. Thank you very kindly for your time.